I can tolerate this body. That's enough for me. I decided that that was enough for me. I decided that in order to be recovered, I didn't actually need to love my body, and especially not all the time. The thing I did not expect that actually does end up happening is you do have these glimpses of loving your body. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Uncovery podcast. My name is Maddie, and I talk about eating disorders and mental health and well-being and getting out of our own way and autonomously stepping into challenges so that we can overcome them and move forward using evidence. And today, I thought we're overdue for a bit of a life update. If you are a longtime listener of the podcast, you will know that in previous episodes, I would basically, at the beginning of each, talk through what I was going through week over week over week in my own recovery. And if you're a longtime listener, you will also have noticed that there has been a bit of a hiatus as well. So we're overdue for a bit of a life update. And that's basically what I want to do today. Talk about my recovery. Am I recovered? And where things sort of stand with me right now. The way to kind of go about this is I want to tell a couple of stories. So you'll remember that from a previous episode, I have one that's called Are You in Recovery or Are You Recovering? And that was when an ex, a person I had previously dated who I had been talking to, I had been talking about my recovery, and this is when I was still very much in it. And he asked me, because I would refer to it as in recovery, what does that mean? What does that mean? And he asked me like, well, are you in recovery or are you recovering? Like what's, and I didn't notice a difference at that point. I hadn't thought about the difference at that point. What it inspired in my mind was recovering is active. In recovery is kind of a purgatory type, yes, we're kind of like doing this thing, but recovering, to frame it that way, is much more conscious and intentional. And so I sort of held on to that concept then in the next, year or year and a half to come. The other story takes place on a first date. And so once you are feeling like very steady in your recovery and feeling very good, you may choose to start dating again. Because like dating in recovery, like 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Like if you're not really there yet, you just don't have the energy to do it. You also don't really have the interest or the inclination to be like engaging with people. Or at least I did not. So I like decided to start dating again in the fall. And I was on a first date. And there was rapport built before this first date. I'm not a person that shies away from sharing my story or my struggles with people if I'm on dates with. Some people might be like, this isn't really first date material to be like, I was anorexic and now I'm recovering and I eat now. But if you have rapport, and honestly, I'm just like kind of the person that I'm totally willing to have those kinds of discussions at any point. So I'm on this first date and I'm saying, yeah, and so now I'm good. I'm hesitating to say I'm recovered in this sentence. I'm telling him about like where I'm at, how I am, where I've come to, and I'm stumbling over this word recovered because it was never one that I had really said out loud that I identified with up until that point. And I say that to him. I say like I'm struggling to kind of say I'm recovered. I'm like not sure whether or not that's the right word to use. And this man has no idea of like my history. He hasn't been through this whole like process with me. And he's like, well, I mean, everything that you've told me, you seem like you're probably recovered. Like, what is it about sort of the word that gives you hesitation? And so I'm thinking about it and I'm like sort of talking through it and realizing that the word recovered feels very committal. That there's this place that you think you arrive at, that you're recovered, and that seemed like such a faraway place for me for so many years that I wasn't used to being there yet. Because, I mean, in reality, the strength of my recovery has only been extremely good for, I don't know, like 9 months probably from today. And so at that point, it had probably only been like for 3 months before that I had really like slayed my big dragons. So I was like, so I keep dancing around this word, and I'm like keeping kind of hesitant about it. And I'm like, no, like I am recovered. Like if I think about the metrics for what I would score recovery against, because you sort of have this journey between very, very ill, getting better, in recovery, recovering, and then recovered. And that's like where normal people are, kind of like if you're like normal again, if normal, healthy, well behaviors is where we like want to arrive, that's kind of where we get to. So on all those metrics, I'm realizing in real time, like, oh, I am. But because it happens so gradually, and because your life just sort of normalizes and you don't notice that you don't think about these things so much anymore, you never really have that moment of like, yes, 2 minutes ago I was not recovered. Now I am. So I say, I think, yeah, I am recovered. Like I feel like I probably am. And we sort of keep talking, and at some point he sort of says, sounds like you could probably trust yourself a little bit more. And I was like, no one had ever said to me like, Maddie, you can trust yourself now. Like you're there. You can trust yourself. You get to decide that you're recovered. Like you can trust you. So that was profound. And so to answer the question of the title of this video, I'm recovered, and I have been for some time. And it is somewhere that I really never thought I would be, to be honest. Like there were very, very few moments through the recovery process where I thought, yeah, I'm gonna be a person that can like eat normally, that can move my body normally, that doesn't have this noise in my head all the time, that can be at peace with my body, much less actually like it. And to have those things sort of like gradually happen has been a very, very profound experience. And it's not a magical experience. It's not something that I'm special for having done. It's difficult, but you can do it. Do you know what I mean? Like you can decide to do it. So I wanted to sort of answer a few questions about recovery and what it's like and what my life is like now. And there are certain things that I believe that I learned through this process of recovery that will drive how these episodes go, what I talk about, because the main thing is that I don't think that there's a difference between recovering from an eating disorder and other big things in our life. There are, of course, unique things about an eating disorder, but the overall process is something that I think we all can share in the different experiences that we have. So here are some questions that either people have kind of reached out and asked me, or that like family and friends have been curious about in this whole kind of journey. So let's talk about that. So the first question is, what has been the biggest change in my life since probably the last time that I updated on this? Recovery-wise, I just don't think about it that much. It's also, when I'm reflecting, a little bit of the reason that the podcast consistency hasn't been where I would love it to be. That involved with, other life priorities and things that have just kind of gotten in the way of me being able to make this a priority. It takes time. But because my life has renormalized, I'm not focused on eating disorders all of the time anymore. I'm not constantly thinking about it. I'm not constantly having like light bulb moments and insights because I'm no longer going through the process in real time. So the biggest change is just I have so much more mental space to have like a normal life. And I don't know how else to explain that. And if you haven't had an eating disorder or something that's just like constantly on your mind, there's no other way to explain it other than that my brain just has more space. There's time and energy for other things. My energy, generally speaking, is heads and shoulders above where it was when I was in recovery. You may remember that I would just have to have naps all the time. I would have to take breaks from work after eating a meal because I was so tired I couldn't function after eating. I was gritting my teeth to get through the day and just putting myself to bed when I couldn't tolerate the discomfort of life. Those things don't happen anymore. I don't need to do those things. I have like a steady, consistent amount of energy all throughout the day. And so I can just like do things. I can do things at night now. I have like some very early mornings with the work that I do, which like sometimes prevents me from having anything but like a very early bedtime. But that's not because of my eating disorder anymore. Like all of the challenges that I have are no longer because of my eating disorder. That's the biggest change, is that there's brain space and my challenges are normal human challenges. How do I currently manage my well-being and maintain my recovery? It's not something that I'm having to fight through every single day anymore. The maintenance of recovery when you're recovered is more about just keeping all of your basics high, as any other person in the world that doesn't have an eating disorder would do. So making sure that I'm getting enough sleep and like managing my stress, that I'm moving my body. And because I'm recovered now, I can do that with a healthy mindset and without doing it compulsively and problematically. That's another giant change, is that I can exercise and I can do things from a place of health instead of a place of desperate compulsive, just burning of calories, that kind of thing. So looking after your sleep, your stress, your movement of your body, nutrition. Am I eating things that are giving me energy? Am I feeling good with what I'm eating? I think a misconception of people that are in eating disorder recovery is that you will only have to eat quote unquote challenging, unhealthy, whatever, like processed foods, like that you're never going to be able to quote unquote eat healthy things ever again because they're inherently disordered. That is totally, totally false. You have to obtain an adequate pattern of nutrition that includes all kinds of foods, including ones that are processed and I don't know, whatever, treat foods, call them whatever you want. I find the vernacular around this like so exhausting that I'm like afraid to say junk food. I'm afraid to say healthy and unhealthy. I'm afraid to say processed food. But including every single type of food, so long as you're not allergic to it or that you genuinely just hate the taste of it, which by the way is difficult to parse out when you have an eating disorder and very easy to do when you don't. By exploring all of those foods, by integrating all those foods and doing it over and over and over and over again, you allow your body to get comfortable and more importantly, your mind to get comfortable with all of those different things. And only then, when everything is fair game, are you able to then choose what you like the most or eat what you feel powers your body best. And you can only do that from like a really intuitive place later, after you're recovered and like you're back and connected with your body and sustaining your well-being and your physical. Like that takes ages. But once you can do that, then you know that you can have your basics all in a row. And that's what then drives your well-being. So that's sort of like the physical day-to-day, like how do you maintain your recovery? It's by making sure that all your basics are there so that your system and your cognition is not taxed from any of those places. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to perfectly balance those and fill your tank in all of those domains all of the time. So when things flip, you don't have to cope with those things via messing with your food, messing with your body, messing with exercise, whatever. You have like other channels to do it. I don't go to therapy as often as I did. I go to therapy very rarely now. But if something comes up, like a normal life problem, and I go and I have therapy and have a chat, have a check-in, and I feel better, and I have my tools and I process stuff, and then I'm okay. So it's about managing well-being in the way that like a normal person would and sort of riding the waves as they come. Now, there are still times where either through your body image or just you're in a mood or you're hormonal or like something's happening in your life, you will sometimes have thoughts that are very compelling that may want to pull you back into your eating disorder. Or you may find yourself on autopilot, sort of like going towards a certain habit or being like, oh, I have a lot of anxious energy, like maybe I should run. And then you do have to do this like very real check of, is this in support of myself or is this some kind of punishment or distraction or trying to circumvent an emotion? So it's like you have to sort of continue to be aware of it. Even though you no longer have the eating disorder, you will still need to be aware of your thoughts. And perhaps years down the line, that won't even be a thing for me. Where I am right now is that there are still things that come up in my brain during times of stress, or if I haven't slept well. That's a killer. Not sleeping well is like the biggest trigger of like anything negative happening in my brain. But so much less of it is like, okay, we'll go do something with food or try and change your body or something like that. Body image, I don't know if that's a thing that perhaps because it's just so ingrained in our society and our experiences as women that we'll ever, as like a collective, be able to fully escape from. I don't know. I wish that for us, and I want that for us. And there are women that I think actually truly are very, very at ease and have comfort with their bodies. And I love that for them, and I want that for them. Neutrality has been my best friend in this process, where I don't have to love, like letting go of the need to love my body or holding myself to that standard. Letting go of holding myself to that standard has been really important in my own happiness and well-being. Because if I can just like sit with it and be like, okay, well, I can live in this body, I can tolerate this body, that's enough for me. I decided that was enough for me. I decided that in order to be recovered, I didn't actually need to love my body, and especially not all the time. The thing I did not expect that actually does end up happening is you do have these glimpses of loving your body. That is totally possible. And I don't think that we need to be ashamed of that either. Like, I don't think that we need to be so diehard about body neutrality that being happy or proud of our bodies is inherently disordered. Again, I think that there's like a middle ground of like, you can love your body and you can like how it functions. And I dare say you can like how it looks. I think that's beautiful. So I don't think there's anything shameful in that if you are recovered, that you're like proud of your body. So I have moments of that. I have glimpses of that. And I have them a lot more than I did before. So yes, that's sort of like my thoughts on well-being and how things have been going there. Have there been any unexpected aspects of recovery that I've encountered? I get the most unexpected thing was that I recovered. That was a shocker to me. But also, everything that they tell you about recovery and about being recovered is true. That continued to be an unexpected thing about recovery for me, is that people have these cliches and, oh, like you just have to get through the hard stuff. Like there's no other way but through. There are no shortcuts. You just have to do the work. Yes, it's really hard. The mucky middle, all of that stuff is totally true. And like, you are enough as you are, and nobody is going to stop loving you if you gain weight. Or, like all of these things that run counter to the narratives that eating disorders speak in our minds. All of these things that they tell you, quote unquote, are indeed true. So that continued to be an unexpected turn of events. Oh, and that you get every single thing that you could possibly want out of life on the other side of your eating disorder. That phrase, everything you want is on the other side of fear, is the most true thing that has ever existed. So all of the dreams that you have about like what a recovered you is capable of, what a recovered you wants out of life, I can actually stand on this and promise you that those things are on the other side of your eating disorder, because I'm there and I'm experiencing that in real time every day. And I'm extremely grateful for it. And that is not to say that my life is perfect or that it will always be like this. But there's a 0% chance of getting those things if you don't recover, right? Does that make sense? So like everything you want is over here once you recover. And so it's yours for the taking in its imperfect perfection that's over here. But you will certainly not get those things if you keep your eating disorder. There's no chance of you getting them down here. So that's what I would say is like pleasantly unexpected. What advice would I give to somebody that is where I was the last time that we would have had sort of a chat like this? I would say the final mile is so worth it. Like the last push to go from almost there to very much there is the only way that you're going to be able to sustain recovery. Like you can't keep this little piece of your eating disorder and expect things to improve in your life. You have to go all the way with it. And that final mile is so, so, so important. It's almost like you want to double down with your care team, with your support, with the people around you for the final push. Like just throw everything at it at the end, because then you will know for sure that you can carry through and sustain this. And I would also say, don't let go of your treatment immediately upon thinking like, oh, I'm in a really good spot, because there will be things that sort of come up at the end. And as the eating disorder is dying, it is going to be screaming at you. So in that last bit, you really need to like create that village around you to make sure that you can keep with it and stay well. That's what I would say. And to keep that going even after you feel like you're in a good place. Trust that other people will know before you will how well you are. You have to kind of trust that other people's judgments might be more accurate than yours in some ways. And that's not to say don't trust yourself, but as you're kind of getting to that final push of recovery and really being like, am I there yet? Am I not there? Like, trust your team around you. They will bring it up to you to be like, we can probably close this file, or, you know, we probably don't need to see each other as often, or there will be like this natural kind of conclusion to relationships that you have with different aspects of your care team that will probably become obvious to them even more so than you. Like they'll know probably better than you will. And you got to kind of trust that process, because if you come out half baked, you will likely relapse and slip back again. And so it's just like really making sure that you're done, but before you complete those sort of relationships is, I think, really, really important. That's the advice that I would give, is like that final push. Like you can absolutely do it, but you got to stay committed to being like, no single thread of this eating disorder is coming with me. None of it. Are there any new resources or influences that have impacted my recovery lately? I think expanding my horizons outside of recovery content has actually been profound for my recovery and my relationship to my eating disorder. Comes one of these things where, because I've decided to be an advocate and to do this podcast and to help other people hopefully through this type of thing, you always kind of run the risk of being like, am I ever away from this? Because I can't fully move on from eating disorders in general, because I talk about it all the time. I care about it. I want to make an impact on the world in this way. So I don't want to be steeped in those resources all the time, especially if I'm creating them. So what I do is I sort of don't focus on recovery content, even like the Instagram stuff, because if I have like an Instagram for this podcast, and that algorithm and that feed, because of the people that I follow and the resources that I follow, it's all kind of like eating disorder, wellness, mental health, etc. I don't scroll through that a lot. I will look from time to time. I think it's important to be sort of up to date on what's happening in the eating disorder world, even just so that I can kind of comment on it. But I'm not steeping myself in recovery content. Like, I don't need to know what Sally Ann, who has an Instagram that posts all her food because she's in recovery. I don't need to do that stuff anymore. That's improving my relationship with the recovery community and the content. So there's helpful content out there for people that are in recovery, but for me, I haven't been consuming it because I don't need it anymore. If anything, it's more of like a distraction from just being a normal person at this point. What I do is I do this podcast and I care about this. And so that is a helpful resource, I hope. And it's also like an outlet for me to sort of talk about these things. Like I said, I see my therapist from time to time, but it's more rare and it's focused on more just like life things now. Podcasts that talk about being empowered and having control over your outcomes, people that are very critical thinkers, people that have perhaps different than mainstream ideas about what wellness means and how we can actually get there. Those are the types of resources that I've been looking at more. I find them much more empowering, and I think they stand up to criticism more readily than some of the previous stuff that I would have been listening to and talking about. And yeah, I'll comment more on that kind of stuff, I think, in other episodes. But those are it's more like de-influencing myself than actually influencing myself through content curation and consumption. What are my goals or aspirations for the future regarding my health and recovery? They are limitless. I'm actually not great at setting goals. You know, people that say by the end of this year, I will have done XYZ, and they have like KPIs and metrics and progress tracking, and like they know. I love that for them. I actually wish that I did do that. And like I probably could, to be honest. It's just not something that comes very naturally to me. I know what I want my life to look like. I know that I want to get married and have a family, and those things became much more important to me in the recovery process. That's another thing that I've noticed in my journey, is that I used to be so attached to like professional and measurable outcomes of success. And part of it, I think, was just related to the fact that I had an eating disorder, and that like my body, my psyche, my emotions were so stunted that I didn't even know how to engage. I didn't have any inclination to engage romantically or otherwise to like build that part of my life. So then when my body healed and my mind healed and my heart healed, that became available to me as like a desire again. And that was a profound shift, because all of a sudden I thought about that a lot. I wanted it and believed that was a big part of like what I wanted for the future. Of course, I want to like maintain my professional sort of standing and grow my business and get to do cool work around the world. Like everything I'm doing, I'm absolutely obsessed with. I love it. So that it's more just about like keeping that going. In terms of contributing to the world, I think that writing my book, continuing to do this podcast more consistently, speaking tours, that's the kind of stuff that I want to do. Is I want to like make real change, because I think that the experience that I have has provided me with a lot of insight that could help other people. And so this seems to be the platform to push that forward. So those are my goals and aspirations. There are a few of them, just small things. How has sharing my journey publicly impacted myself and others? Well, I can't for sure say how it impacts others. I can say that the feedback that I've gotten from others, it seems to have impacted people. And if it impacted one person and it allowed them to get help and recover, that would be enough. That would be worth every single hour of effort that this takes. Like I've said in the past, sharing my journey publicly was a real catalyst for my own recovery, because it really allowed me to be honest with myself and with others, because I would have a very difficult time looking myself in the face if I was continuing to hold on to my eating disorder and then talking about myself as though I was recovering and was changing my behavior. So that drove my recovery immensely. Getting to talk to all the guests that I have is just like felt like free therapy to me, to go through those conversations and to collect those insights. So that was a profound help as well. And then I just think that sharing your story allows other people to share their stories. And so I have heard from other people that are struggling, and they're like, thank you for doing this. And that, you know, they feel like they can talk to somebody now, or that maybe one day they can kind of go public, quote unquote, with their eating disorder, or whatever else it is that they're dealing with. So that's how my, you know, sharing it publicly has impacted my life. It's been only positive, I will say that, except for that one reel that I posted about medical assistance in dying for people with eating disorders. When I posted it on TikTok, and I got like some interesting feedback, which I'm totally open to. And at the end of the day, it actually ended up being a very quality exchange, comment to comment to comment. And the person kind of came around actually to understand what it was that I asked. Because, you know, when you first hear something online or see a video online, you're immediately probably triggered by like one little part of what they said, or you're assuming what they mean based on something that they've said or a position that they hold. And that might not be accurate in any way, shape, or form. And in this case, it wasn't. It was sort of like reading into something that I hadn't actually said. And so then through the exchange, polite exchange via social media, which I don't know, I think it's a miracle that that's possible. And it gives me hope for the future that we can actually have these things. We sort of like came to an understanding. But other than that, it's been nothing but support and positive feedback. And I hope that continues. Although I am extremely open to people disagreeing with things that I have to say, because that's the whole point, is that we can reach a point of truth and better understanding for myself and for others if we can disagree with each other lovingly. All right. Is there anything you now view differently about recovery or mental health since the last episode about my journey? Yes. There are a few things. And honestly, they will probably all have their own episodes, because one thing about recovery that I didn't expect, another one, is that with all of this new brain space and energy and ability to connect dots, I have changed my mind about a lot of things that I used to believe when I was in recovery. And those have been very interesting to experience. I love changing my mind with more information being available to me, more experience having happened in my life. Because some of those are kind of like controversial opinions that I have, and that was not the purpose of this video. So we'll leave those ones for now. But that's been sort of my life update. I'm thriving. I have normal people issues. But things are really good. Recovery is possible. And yes, I am recovered. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with me as I sort of navigate the balance of continuing to do this podcast from a recovered place and still want to provide insights about eating disorders and other things now, so we can expand it a bit. But I appreciate you being here. I appreciate feedback and anything that you would be interested in knowing or having me talk about as we go forward. You can find us at Uncovery Pod on Instagram. Uncoverypod.com is the website. And those are the main places. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, try to make reels. All of the normal places that you would find podcasts is where you can find me. So thank you again for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode.